Welcome back to 5 Acres Honey Farm. I'm Tara Lynn, and I am just bottling a little bit of honey right now. This honey is exclusively for me and maybe a few select people, but it is not for sale. This is sourwood honey, which I'll explain a little bit more about. All of the rest of my honey, I'm kind of surrounded by boxes right now. I'm about to print some labels. I've already bottled the last harvest of honey. This was from my hives out in Western North Carolina near Bryson City, and this honey sold out in completely record-breaking time. I had to pull the order form down about 2 hours after I put it up, and the two final requests that came in, I actually wasn't able to fulfill because so many orders came in so quickly. So I'm gonna just share a little bit about why I don't take pre-orders, because I get that request a lot. There is one exception, and that's if someone is having a special event. So if there is a wedding or a party or client appreciation gifts, or if you're trying to put together some swag for a team, in those instances, I will take a pre-order, because generally those are gonna be like 4-ounce jars, or if your event, such as a wedding, you have guests flying in, I have 1-ounce jars. And although I have not bottled any, there are other ounce jars that are a little bit bigger than the 1 ounce that could be favors. And my sister actually just told me this past week that the TSA limit on the size of the liquids you can take on will be lifted soon. So perhaps you could have even 1-pound jars for your honey favors for weddings and such. So that is one exception where I will take a pre-order, but I do not promise anything. And so that's usually where people are planning very far in advance. So for example, if you have a wedding next May, I will not really be able to help you, because I would not be extracting until June or July. So it's really good to plan in advance. But if you have a wedding next September, you have a really great chance right now, if you reach out, that I can put you at the top of my list. And as soon as I pull honey off the hives, I can confirm if I've got enough or not. And so I want to share a few reasons why I wait until I pull the honey off the hives. And while I do that, I'm going to get this bottled up. I'm going to, I've got this big jar just for myself, because I keep a little library of all of the honey harvests that I have. And this sourwood honey, a lot of people, if you're not from Appalachia or North Carolina, you may not have heard of sourwood before. There's just a little pocket of space in Appalachia where there's a high density of sourwood trees. And I learned at an event this spring that on a global scale, in different honey competitions, sourwood honey has won more awards than any other honey. So that's really great to hear. You can't really tell from probably from your view, but it actually looks very clear. Like if you were just up close here watching it go into the jar, it looks like I'm pouring water into the jar. It's very, very clear, and so it has a very light color, as you're probably able to tell from that angle. So anyways, aside from the sourwood honey, which is pretty rare to acquire and to harvest, and I'll share more about that at the end of the video, and what my hopes are for this in the future. But one of the reasons why I do not promise any honey is because there are so many variables when it's time for the nectar flow. And one of those variables are swarms. And if you're not familiar, when a hive swarms, half the colony leaves, and it takes half of the resources with them. So that means if there's a few boxes full of honey, you'll have half as much honey. So if I was expecting, to extract like I did here, I pulled 6 supers off the hives, and if I had promised all, folks all these jars of honey, and then I go out there and I learn that the hive swarmed, then there's only going to be half as much. So I'd be disappointing people. If I took deposits, I'd have to go through the effort and administration of returning those deposits. And I really love this. This is actually my grandmother's pitcher, but she probably never would have imagined this is what it would be used for, but it has a really great little lip on it, so like the honey never really drips down and causes a mess, so it's really easy to pour. So with the swarms, you never know. And that can happen even with swarm prevention, even with doing splits, and you really don't wanna, I don't wanna disappoint people. Another reason why I don't promise honey in advance is that there could be a brood disease or other disease in the colony that is going to prevent the colony from thriving, and it may not have healthy foragers that can go out at the right time of the nectar flow and be well enough to bring back enough nectar for the colony and enough to have a surplus. So I haven't experienced that before, but just knowing that anything could potentially happen, I like to make sure that I'm not going to make a promise about something and then if my colony dies or like I said, if they get a disease and they're just not thriving, that it's really not something that I'd want to then disappoint folks on. The next reason, which is actually, I feel like we're in a timely time for discussing it, is weather. So there are a few things that can happen. One, there could be a drought, and it could be beautiful sunshine, mild days, and great flying weather for the workers to go forage. But if there's a drought, then you have trees and other nectar producing plants not able to produce enough nectar. So there's not as much for the bees to bring back. And not only are the honeybees going out there and foraging, but you've got native pollinators looking for nectar too. So if there's less of a source, you've got that same competition that's here, but not enough to go around. The other factor related to weather, opposite of drought, is a lot of rain. So we've also had that as well. We've got some weather coming in, and so if that rain happens around a time where the trees are in bloom, other nectar sources are in bloom, they might be really healthy and producing a great amount of nectar because they've got the resources, the plants have the resources that they need, but the honeybees can't fly in the rain. So if we have several days of rain, several weeks of rain, and it's during that one time of the year, like when the sourwood is blooming or where other prime nectar sources, then they're not going to bring in that honey. So another reason why I don't like to make any promises. Another reason I don't take orders in advance, because it's unpredictable with the honey, is that there is a little bit of predictability. With my management of my hives, I remove 20% of the hive's comb every year. So that means every 5 years I'm removing comb. And so I've never have any comb in my hives that's more than 5 years old. I do keep a few frames for swarm traps, so there are some exceptions, and then those frames might cycle through some hives if I catch a swarm, and then those get removed the following year. So there is an exception. Perhaps there's some frames that are 6 years old in random places, but otherwise they're all 5 years old or younger in the colonies. And the reason for doing that is when I first started beekeeping, I was part of the Certified Naturally Grown program. So I have some videos about that I can link to in the description. And I still practice and manage my hives according to the CNG standards, but I don't have the capacity right now to maintain the inspections. So if I ever have the time for that, then I'm all set to just jump back into it and add that label back to my jars here. But for now, I'm not doing that. And part of the CNG standards, they require removal of 20% of the comb. So removing it, comb every 5 years, just, making sure you label it. And that's to help prevent spores and diseases and contaminants that foragers may have brought back. Maybe they were exposed to some pesticides. They could have collected water from a polluted river or something, and then it was stored in the comb, and then the comb absorbed that. And then you've got baby bees forming in that comb, so they're getting exposed to that. So there's like all these layers of risk that start to develop. And when you do that, you're creating an environment where maybe a really healthy hive is going to be exposed to something that they may be susceptible to, that they didn't have to be exposed to. So why bother introducing that risk? Just cutting out that comb is really great. But the reason this impacts honey is it takes 8 pounds. So 8 pounds of honey, so 8 of these jars, to produce 1 pound of wax. It's an extremely resource heavy process for the bees to create all that comb. And if I'm cutting out several dozen frames of comb, that is a lot of honey that they're going to use that season to rebuild their comb so that they can store extra honey and have the space for the queen to lay eggs and have enough foragers to bring back resources for the colonies. So with that, I started beekeeping in 2017, in June of that year, and I only had so many frames, and it was kind of past the end of, you know, the nectar flow, so not a lot of comb production. I fortunately had purchased a full hive, so I had drawn comb, but that meant that 2018 was going to be a big comb production year. So I wasn't planning on getting much of a honey harvest because I knew they were going to be busy building comb out and growing. And when that happened, I want to get a bigger jar. And actually I'll be able, no, I think I'll be okay. Can I just, no, I'm okay with this. So thinking back to 2018, now we're in 2020, why am I thinking of this? 2024, so that's 6 years ago. So 2018, big comb production, I cut that out. 2019, also big comb production. And now this year, I was expecting the bees to be really busy building comb. Knowing that they are gonna be putting all their resources into that, I wasn't expecting very much honey. And especially out with my mountain hives, which have been phenomenal producers the last 2 years, or the last 3 years, I should say, because this is my 3rd summer with them out there. But the first 2 years, they brought in so much honey, and I cut out a lot of old comb there this past winter. And this year I wasn't expecting much, and they still produced a good amount, but they were building some really beautiful comb this year. So they would have had so much more if I had opted to just leave them that old comb. But I did also learn this year at an event that old comb does impact the flavor of honey. So I feel not only is it helping, not only is removing the comb helping to keep the hive and the colony with, you know, a healthy environment, but then it's also helping to preserve the flavor of the honey. So that also has some great benefits too. So it keeps it much closer to what it should be tasting like. Another reason I don't promise honey in advance is that having the honey requests come in once I pull the honey off the hives, then I know about how much I've got and when I need to cut off orders. And it allows me to see, okay, pretty much everyone wants a 2-pound honey jar, which I've got a whole box of 2-pound honey jars over here now. And like nobody really wants these 4-ounce jars. This isn't true, I'm just giving this as an example, but you know, I can see those requests coming in, and then that will tell me, all right, next year I need to order more of these pound jars or more of those, and I don't need to bottle, you know, 20 1-pound jars when someone is looking for holiday gifts and they want 10 4-ounce jars. So that way it's a lot less waste because I'm bottling exactly to the requests that come in. I've gotten some requests from people who want to actually, like, not just a few stores, but like actual individual people who want to purchase all of the honey in advance, like the entire harvest. And I've declined those offers because I have close to 100 people on my honey list who get the email updates every year and have the opportunity to order. And also I probably should have given this background. So I have an email list which you can sign up for. I'll leave it in the description. And the folks on the email list get the alert first that the order form is live. and I usually release that early in the morning, on whichever day it ends up being. And then by the afternoon, if I haven't sold out, I then will share on social media and more folks have an opportunity to order. So there's the benefit of being on the email list is you get the alert first. So what I wanted to say is that there are some places that will really limit orders, and instead of allowing you to, get a few 1-pounders and get some 4 ounces, I got some 2-pounders, and mix and match, that they say you get 1 jar and this is the size and that's it. So I don't really want to go in that direction, because that means I might get 20 honey orders, this season. That's 20 different orders. I need to confirm, verify with the person, confirm how they're gonna pay, when they're gonna pay, did they pay, and if I have to limit that and say, okay, like if 20 orders was, let's just say like someone's getting 3 jars at least with every order, that's 60 different jars of inventory I'm managing. If I did that individually for people, that's 60 different people that I then have to verify their jar, their order, their money, all of that. It's a lot more administration, and I don't really see the benefit to that. So I prefer at this point keeping the orders so that they can be customized per the individual's needs. That's not to say, just like, what just happened this month where the orders came in, but there just wasn't enough honey as those later orders came in. The other part that I wanted to share that is a reason why I don't want to promise these orders in advance is for the past few years, when I've gotten honey orders, I've not only had to coordinate like the actual order with, coordinate the order with the person, but then I had offered opportunities for honey drops in Raleigh, Durham, Winston-Salem, Asheville, and actually did a few custom drops in other places for folks when certain needs came up. So it was a lot of logistics, a lot of planning, a lot of being somewhere at a certain time, and then if there's a few people coming, giving a window of time. So if I was going to wait there for a half an hour, it just was adding up to be a lot of mileage and really just a big draw on my energy during a really busy, exhausting, hot season. So this year I changed how I did the honey orders, and I knew, I did put it on the form so people knew when they were ordering the honey what was expected. But if I was promising honey to folks and then I said, hey, you're gonna have to come get it, they may not want it then, so like that's not, I feel like I want to make sure that I'm being really transparent and clear about things. Being able to structure the honey sales, I'm not gonna make it to the full jar. It's gonna get close, but it's not gonna be there. But being able to structure things in a way that will make things easier for me, or at least slightly. And the easiest thing really, and actually it has some drawbacks, would be not to sell honey at all. That would be really easy. But not only that, but just not to extract the honey. I actually had a moment before extracting from the mountain hives, and I had the extractor out there with me. I was all suited up, and I'm looking through the boxes and I'm sweating, and I'm like, why am I doing this? Like, I should just leave this honey here. Like, this is a lot of work. And I'm like, no, people enjoy it. Plus I do want some of the honey, and if you're gonna get the extractor dirty, you might as well take a few more boxes inside, right? So there's things like that. But if I choose at some point not to extract in whatever season, it does pose a problem to me, because the boxes are so heavy that it gets to the point where I cannot lift the box. I have to remove half the frames and then remove the box, and then I have to keep staggering that with every box just to inspect the hives. It also puts the colonies in a state of stress, which I've noticed, like one of the colonies right now, they just had so much honey, and even from extracting, they still had so much left because I do leave a lot, and they were getting honey bound, so there was no space for the queen to lay. So I had to rearrange the frames and allow her a comfortable brood nest so she could lay. And so those are things that if the frames are all full of honey, I wouldn't even be able to give her that opportunity to have space. So extracting does help them. And of course, pretty much all of the sales for the honey go back into buying equipment because they just keep expanding. So it just helps them all around. Yeah, these are all of the many reasons why I don't promise any honey for anybody. I really do hope that I get, you know, a good harvest, not only for others, but for me too. Now I'm done with this. So good. So I've got this little jar here, but yeah, I think that, you know, a lot of people think that honey is a guarantee, and I just want to make sure that you understand, and if you're new to beekeeping too, that you understand that you might be putting yourself in a position where you might be disappointing folks or causing some extra administration and work that you don't really need to do. So hopefully that helped. And I'm sure there's probably more reasons why you don't really want to promise honey for folks, because there's so many other variables in beekeeping. If I did miss anything, let me know in the comments. And if you take pre-orders for honey, why do you do that? Or do you set a good expectation and let people know that it could get canceled or it may not happen? Just like to know. Plus, I think there's some beekeepers who partner with larger apiaries, and so they're able to get honey from other places and then label it as their own, which is not what I do, and I'm not interested in doing that. So I'm curious, like, what your management practices might be like if you are able to make those promises for honey orders. At the beginning of this video, I mentioned that at the end I would share a little bit more about sourwood honey. Sourwood honey, like I had explained before, is very clear. So it has slightly golden hue to it. It may not be coming up on video as clear as it looks in person, but it is really challenging to time the harvest, because when the sourwood go in bloom, you want to make sure you get your supers on the hive then. So there are some beekeepers who go out every day right before the sourwood are about to open, and they check to see what color the nectar is coming in, and then they'll put a new hive body on with a fresh super, and they'll be able to extract. So the reason you want to do that is that if you've got some comb in your colony and you're like, oh, the sourwood's coming in, that's nice, they might fill a half a frame with sourwood and the other half with black locust, and then when you go to extract, you're not having this pure sourwood experience. So the idea is that you're putting this super on right when the sourwood go into bloom, and then you would hopefully have a whole super, if not more, of just sourwood honey to extract and bottle. So there's the challenge with that, of timing it right. When the sourwood are in bloom, it is said that the bees ignore all other plants and they just go to the sourwood. I don't know if that is true, because I actually, there was something I noticed recently that I observed with a honeybee, and I should still have the clip. If I do, I'll play it here. I also want to post that clip, if I still have it, as a short, because I think it shows what, what I had always believed to be true, is that honeybees practice flower fidelity. And I've always been told that, and read and heard, that a honeybee will never go to different plants on her foraging trip. Like, she might go to clover and then go back and drop off that nectar, and then maybe go to a different source if the clover was depleted on her next flight. But any instruction that I've been part of has always been that you're not going to see a honeybee go to a blueberry bush and then stop at a tulip poplar and then stop, in different places on the same foraging flight. But the little clip that I have shows a honeybee going to a comfrey flower and then going straight to a sweet alyssum blossom in the same flight. So that obviously isn't true. So thinking of that, and thinking of that kind of like urban or rural beekeeper legend of the honeybees just going to the sourwood when it's in bloom, it remains to be seen where that evidence lives. So with the sourwood, because the sourwood trees are only in a certain part of Appalachia, there's not an opportunity for beekeepers all across the country to take advantage of this particular nectar source. And so you've got, that kind of like challenge working against you depending on where you live and where your hives are located. A lot of beekeepers will truck hives into regions of Appalachia with known density of sourwood. So then you've got stress on colonies coming in and traveling, and then they're competing with any colonies that are stationary in the area, plus the native pollinators too. And the sourwood, because it's just available for about a week or two in the summer, you really have to time it. And then all those variables I mentioned earlier about drought and rain, those things have to come into play. And all of those little stars have to align for the honeybees to be able to pull in a sourwood harvest. So this is my first sourwood harvest, and I very well could have offered these for sale, but because it is so special, and I've had my hives in the mountains for 3 summers now, and this is the first time I've been able to extract sourwood honey, I don't want to sell it. So it's just for me and for some friends and family. And you might be curious about how do I know it's sourwood honey? Well, based on the flavor of it, and also based on the color, based on the timing of this, I'm fairly certain it's sourwood. So the other reason I didn't want to sell it is to have a lab test done on it would be close to $300. And so by the time I factor that lab cost into every bottle, these bottles would be so expensive, I doubt anyone would want to purchase them. So I'm going to enjoy it this year. And then if I had a much larger harvest, I would send that in for a lab test and then know for certain that I can bottle it and sell it as sourwood honey. So there's that challenge as well. If you happen to have gotten honey from me at some point, you might be disappointed to know if you did get an order in with this batch for the mountain honey, I was planning on putting a 1 ounce jar of the sourwood with every order and just to surprise everyone. But my husband talked me out of it, and he said, don't do it. He said, you worked too hard on this, you should enjoy it for yourself. So you can blame him for your sourwood loss if you were one of those folks that would have had the opportunity. And I actually had 1 more of these. I had bottled it before I left last week, so this would have been a complete 1 pound jar. But I had brought this on the plane last week when I went up to New York and met my niece for the first time. She was born on the 4th of July. So the honey is not for her. Babies cannot have honey till they're a year old. But I wanted to bring some of this special honey up for my sister and brother-in-law. And yeah, so I really would have had, let's see, 2 pounds, 3 pounds, and like 3.5-ish, right? This would have been, it would have been another, but this would have been in here. So this would have been 2 full pounds, 3, so like 3.5 pounds of sourwood. I thought maybe I had 6, but I was just eyeballing it. But yeah, so 3 pounds without trying. So maybe next year you could try, and maybe there'll be 6 pounds. So we'll see how that goes. Thank you for watching, and I'll share more next time.